I think I'm fundamentally optimistic. Let's also, I think, be honest and look at the history here, where, in terms of broader deals that we've been talking about, we've been trying to have a bilateral investment treaty, which is the first step towards a broader trade agreement. That hasn't happened, and moving forward in 2006. That's where we started the agreement. It hasn't. So I don't think a broader free trade agreement, especially with the mindset that both administrations, both governments have right now, and the history that is, that we have to look at, that's not likely. But I think on the immediate issues, I do think that there can be, some sort of resolution. Now, again, driving back to, one of the things that I wanted to mention was, again, how can we what's the outcome going to be? Is it going to be a specific number on deficit reduction? Because if that's it, then, that's not going to drive the conversation forward. But if we are rooting it in our strategic interests, and we're rooting it in the signals that the business community and everything outside of the two capitals are telling policymakers that, this is a relationship, a trade relationship, and an economic relationship that matters and, is driving real jobs and real growth. And if that's the signal that both governments continue to pick up on and drive forward on, then yes, we can actually see that happen. I think Amitendu discussed that, where the business community is sort of pointing out to these governments saying, look, there is real value here, so don't rock the boat anymore. We want to see this go forward, and don't take more of these steps because it's counter.
I don't think a trade deal is possible, but I think what is possible is an understanding, a clear understanding of certain trade issues. But India has to be proactive. The proactive step has to come from India, because India must realize that after losing market access in the US, it doesn't really have preferential access anywhere. There's no further access that remains for it. It can correct its aim internally. Then obviously it's a different matter, but trade is no longer determined by markets, so I don't think the comparative advantage remains the issue. One has to choose markets.
Potentially a withdrawal without a substantive agreement or an agreement that might not necessarily be what it is. What are the options for India? If there is a deal by September, the US decides to leave, which will be by Taliban.
No, I think that it's time for India to start preparing for what could be coming. I do think there's a good chance that there will be some type of deal, not a comprehensive peace deal, but a deal that would essentially give President Trump the cover he wants to get out of Afghanistan. In that sense, meaning some type of arrangement that would establish a plan for an eventual U.S. troop withdrawal, coupled with a Taliban willingness to distance itself from international terror, which would not be a big deal for the Taliban because it doesn't really have an interest in remaining aligned with Al-Qaeda as a shadow of its former self, and ISIS has never been a friend of the Taliban's anyway. In terms of what India's options are, it's very difficult to say. I don't think there are any good possible outcomes for India in that sense. And I think that all you could hope for, all that India could hope for, and really all that anyone can hope for, is that somehow the Taliban would agree to start negotiating with the Afghan government for some type of political settlement and leading to some type of permanent ceasefire and peace. But is there reason to think that the Taliban would stop fighting, especially if troops are going to be on the way out the door? I don't see why they would be. So I think it's a very troubling scenario for India, no matter how these negotiations plan out, unless you get the very unlikely outcome of a comprehensive peace agreement, which I don't see happening anytime soon.
Yeah, I think, there is likely to be a deal, and it's likely to be a very minimal deal, which will allow the U.S. the cover to get out. India needs to start planning for that. I think everybody's worried that we're seeing a rerun of the early 1990s. And India does not want to be stuck with, the kind of Kandahar negotiating with hostage crisis when the Indian Airlines was hijacked and there was no political base, no political representation in Kabul. I think, it's not only India, the countries in the region have common interests, actually, Iran, China, and others, to ensure that this will be as peaceful a transition as possible. There are demands that Afghans have asked India to step up on the military front to provide beyond training, and India needs to start planning for that. There's little sense that they are, but they should be.
I think you spoke a lot of the Pacific, but you mentioned the word war. Where is the war? I mean, there's a lot of confusion. Can you? One of the US standards. So written a lot of it. Is that a baby?
I think one of the things that we clearly established, and I think some of the misunderstanding about the quadrilateral and the fact that it's exclusive or somehow going to be the only platform for engagement between the US, India, Japan, Australia, to the exclusion of everybody else, came from the fact that when the Free and Open Indo-Pacific was first announced, it was then Secretary of State Tillerson talking about it in a US-India speech about Indo-Pacific, and the thing he talked about a lot was kind of upgrading or kind of restarting the quadrilateral, which had been born in 2007 and died soon after. I think what we do have since then is the fact that each of the countries involved has established that it is a platform for collaboration, but not the platform. It has met 3 times diplomatically. There are countries, I think, probably everybody at this stage but India that wants to essentially bring Australia into the US, India, Japan trilateral military exercise, the maritime exercise, Malabar. India is not ready. So the time, this is something, is a consensus grouping, so to speak, and unless India says yes to that, why hasn't India said yes? Because to some extent still uncertainty, not just about the Australians, will this kind of their approach towards China's survive into their next government, but also uncertainty about the US position on China, see where that goes. I think the other thing is, as you know better than I do, India just does things incrementally. And so the trilateral, US-India-Japan trilateral, for example, it took from 2011, when the trilateral first started at kind of the joint secretary, the bureaucratic level, to go up to 2015. So it took 4 years for it to become kind of upgraded, and then also to have Japan included in a maritime exercise. So I think at the moment where the Quad stand is, it's a diplomatic dialogue. I think you're seeing below the level of the Quad a lot of engagement in the trilaterals involved. And I think what is good for at least Australia and India, who perhaps know each other the least, that's the bilateral that is the least developed, they have been in the last couple of years doing a lot on the defense and security side. So is Japan and India. And so I think there's the Quad, there's a cooperation within, and there's the fact that each of those countries, whether in bilateral or trilateral format, have engagement with other countries in the region, including in Southeast Asia.
We've got about 20 odd minutes. Who wants to start?
Afghanistan, I don't think India has any chance. It's an observer of this whole thing. Take whatever it gets. Do you see the Americans doing a deal with the Chinese in Afghanistan? Iran is on one side, I would say. There's no one else who can stop it. I don't think the Chinese want difficult. Is there a deal going on between them?
Yeah. Thank you. Would I be right in believing, Dr. Palit and Thakker, that the threat of withdrawal of special and differential treatment in the video to India is not directed at India per se. It's, I guess, the concept of some countries declaring themselves as developing countries, even though they have a greater role than 0.5% of the global economy. In global trade, countries like Saudi Arabia, Brunei, Qatar, South Korea, etc., all very wealthy countries by World Bank standards. So what America is doing is, of course, it's a broad principle. And the Indian Commerce Ministry is arguing, I don't know if I'm right in saying so, arguing that with the applied and bound rates, the tariffs imposed by India are well within the bound rates anyway. Even though if America imposes these, withdraws this special or differential treatment, they probably would be WTO inconsistent. If that were to happen, would there be an impact on actual trade with adverse impact on America in lateral trade?
Thank you. Michelle, take a brief.
So my question is for Mr. Michael Kugelman. Okay, when we look at the withdrawal, I think we're going to compare the withdrawal. If you're talking about the US withdrawal in 2019, then let's look at the last time there was a withdrawal, which was in 1989. Soviet Union pulled out of Afghanistan, and at that time we actually know the outcome of it was that when the Soviet Union left, the Americans and Pakistan continued fighting the government of Dr. Najibullah, and then eventually he was hanged. Yes. Okay, so the question is that I would like Mr. Michael Kugelman to compare the two withdrawals between the Soviet Union withdrawal and the withdrawals that's going to take place soon. And then why do you think the outcome why do we see that outcome in 1989 and this outcome in the present day? Just the last point is that, India is not willing to actually invest boots on the ground in Afghanistan. And I would like to know, would you think that India can actually occupy the role that the US has come in and
Occupy is a nice word. But we could start with more questions to you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I think it was Rani that was talking about the comparison with the Soviet withdrawal. I'll let her address that, though. I think several points here. One, the U.S., the reasons why the U.S. is moving so quickly toward a withdrawal from Afghanistan are driven by domestic issues in the United States. Certainly on the part of the president, who simply has no interest in staying in Afghanistan and never did, regardless of the alternative. And also the fact that much of his base really isn't into long-term military engagements. But also, the broader point is a policy one, and I could agree with this, that the United States has tried everything in Afghanistan. It has tried to tame the Taliban on the battlefield, tried to defeat the Taliban on the battlefield. It didn't work. We had 150,000 NATO troops there at the height of the surge in 2010 or whenever it was. That didn't work. And so now the view is to try the other option, the reconciliation, the political, the diplomatic option. And I think that if it gets to a certain point, whether it's a few months more, whatever the case may be, and there's no deal, or there is this minor deal that just the U.S. covered the lead, the U.S. will take that. You could argue that the United States should have done other things, like trying to take the war into Pakistan. I know this has been a point that many in India, and certainly in Washington too, think that the United States was fighting the wrong war, should have gone into Pakistan. Certainly one could discuss that. I myself don't think that would have had any type of difference on the ground. But anyway, quick point on the history point. It's very interesting that when Soviet forces left Afghanistan, the governments, the Soviet-aligned government did not fall right away. It was only after the funding stopped. Once the Soviets and then the Russians stopped funding the government in Afghanistan, then things fell apart. So I think that's important to remember, that if the U.S. were to withdraw, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have chaos and civil war. It's that we stop funding the ANSF, that there could be problems. And then, let's see. Yeah, China. The interesting thing is that the U.S. and China and India, in my view, have increasingly converging interests in Afghanistan. The more that China builds out its Belt and Road Initiative, it has an increasingly stronger need for stability, or political stability in Afghanistan. So if the political angle is better, if the U.S. and China had a healthier relationship, maybe we could look at some type of deal. But I don't think I don't think that's an option. For me, and I'll end here, the issue is to look at this more broadly, and that is through the issue of infrastructure, connectivity. There have been a number of efforts afoot in Afghanistan, such as the TAPI project, U.S.-supported projects to try to build more infrastructure in Afghanistan. India, of course, plays a role in that. When you had the Wuhan summits some months back, there was talk about some type of China-India willingness to build infrastructure projects in Afghanistan. I assume they would have to be outside of the BRI rubric. But the point here is that the United States should support any type of infrastructure development, infrastructure projects that can be carried out by China in Afghanistan, if China actually wants to go on that route.
I think, Michael, you're exactly right. When you look at U.S. interests in Afghanistan, we want to have, peace, a continuation of the elected government, and we don't want the investments, not only in terms of blood loss, but also infrastructure built up, etc., that going to waste. Those interests align with the interests of China, but not only China, Iran, the Central Asian states, so there's Russia, etc. And the Taliban is talking to these other countries, and the U.S. has briefed some of the countries, but given the way this administration engages, deals with its foreign policy, engagements with other countries, it's all sort of transactional, bilateral, and there's little sense of coordinating anything with China, unfortunately. And there's this big opening, as you mentioned, common interests, but given the approach of this current government of the U.S., I see there being little possibility, and of course that then leads to this question of, is history going to repeat itself as not only troops withdraw, once the troops withdraw, there's going to be less interest in funding Afghanistan too.
Just very quickly, for the US-India perspective, there's a key difference between the 89 withdrawal and now, which is then India had a common interest with Russia, Iran, others. This time, it's almost everybody else. Till recently, it was Russia, Pakistan, China, Iran, everybody talking to the Taliban, US, India on one side, and now the US has moved over to the other side too. So now you have a very different space as India is looking at it. On the positive side for India, one question would be, as it was in the 90s, in the broader picture, is that if there's a US withdrawal, does the situation then mean that the US doesn't need Pakistan anymore? So that opens the door for saying, well, we don't even need them beyond, okay, the talks are done, no more interest there, what's the point? And I think this is where kind of the China factor will come in, which is, it's not clear. I think a lot will depend on what China has never wanted to take on the security burden there. It's done kind of economic investment, infrastructure projects under kind of the US security umbrella. The question is, will it want to put troops? Now it's had experience in a lot of countries, including in Pakistan, where it's having trouble in the security front and having to think about investing. Where I think China will want to kind of think about those is not necessarily in the infrastructure domain, but in terms of how it relates to what their perspective of what's happening in Xinjiang is, and what they see in terms of, do they need to put it, whether themselves, whether through kind of the PLA, do they need to get involved, the people in the armed police, or what they've been starting doing, which is using private military contractors. So I think there's an interesting dynamic, but I agree with that kind of on the US-China front, there's one school in the US which is actually saying, let the Chinese get involved, let them get sucked in, let them have to deal with this situation. And maybe it'll actually help all of us, that they'll actually, because they're the only ones with leverage in Pakistan to that extent.
India, the boys stood on the warning deck. We seem to be the only ones committed to WTO this one.
This was called, I think, 4 weeks ago. There was a draft submission by the Representative requesting for a change in the way countries have defined as development. And it had 3 elements. The first is that no OECD country should be considered developing under any circumstances. No country which is a member of the G20 should be considered developing and eligible for membership. And third, no country which has a share of at least 0.5% or more in global trade should be considered developing. Now, there is a pattern to this. The pattern to this is that last year, from April onward, the USTR initiated reviews of the beneficiaries under GSP. In the first round, Asian countries have been covered. India and Turkey were the first to be struck off the list. Turkey was told as having graduated. India was not told as having graduated. In India's case, a discretionary element was justified that India has not responded with reciprocal market access. Indonesia's review is on, and it looks like Indonesia's GSP status will go, because otherwise, it remains a G20 member. So, I think the line up here is pretty clear. The US is going to give a signal to the rest of the world to do its own GSP revision. Look, this is the way we fix developing countries and restrict access. Access should be limited only to the poorest of the developing countries. There is no reason why the WTO shouldn't do that. Because since the time the GATT and the Uruguay round and the WTO came, a lot of water has flown down the river. Who were developing then are certainly no more developing now. So change this place. Impact, yes, there is going to be impact. There is going to be clear impact, at least insofar as the US market is concerned. Today, if India's GSP status goes, the beneficiary, apart from some of the remaining GSP receiving countries, is going to be a non-GSP receiving countries. And the biggest example I can think of is China. Because if today the US and China are able to work out a deal where the tariffs remain static, India's GSP goes, Turkey's GSP goes, China inevitably gets more market access. So I think the impacts are fundamental, and the impact has to be both for the Indian side, for the US economy. US consumers will be affected, no doubt, to an extent. But to what extent that can be fixed up through static, inefficient tariffs is a different issue.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely on the mark there. The thing that I'll add is what is last is China factor. If you look at some of the response to the comments when USTR initially initially began the GSP review, you can see there's two things that two particular stories that I can bring up. One is several companies saying that as of right now. Before GSP, we used to source 85% from China. And because of GSP, we are now actually, so this was specifically India and Vietnam, we've now been able to diversify. And if you take those GSP benefits away, we're going back to 85% sourcing from China. And that's another big concern that I think Amitendu brought out. I think the second thing was there was a committee called the Action for GSP, which submitted a survey of about 300 businesses that they spoke to, and about 27% of them said the direct impact of revoking GSP benefits to India is that they will source from China, increasingly. And I think when that number of businesses say that that's a definite sort of choice that they're going to have to make, when something like this happens, that I think again sort of signals just how much of an impact it's going to have. And looking at the kinds of goods that fall under GSP, there's going to be a disproportionate impact in India for micro, small, and medium enterprises. Because those are the ones that really sort of benefited, and they were competitive vis-a-vis Chinese inputs into broader Chinese goods because of GSP. And now, while India can claim that it's only about 119 million of custom duty reductions that they accrued, so they can sort of walk that off. The disproportionate impact on MSMEs is going to be really, really difficult, especially going into an election when they're going to get face that pressure that they're not going to be competitive vis-a-vis Chinese products anymore, and that 27% of the companies they used to work with in the US are going to say, sorry, we just can't afford it, we're going to go to China now. And I think that's significant.
Just time for a couple of questions.
Hi, my name is Chan from ISAS. Just an open-end question. Someone mentioned India's neutral response on Huawei issue just now. So as we know that China is moving countries around Asia with optic fiber projects and 5G trials through this digital Silk Road. Just want to know, is there anything that the US has done to counter this or to do something similar to the digital Silk Road in Asia or anything like that?
So I know that's not taking a lot of attention in the room, and my question really is, Iran has shown its capability to prevent the fall of Baghdad by mobilizing volunteer forces and Hashad forces. They can do the same in Afghanistan, and it is baffling that the United States, given its priorities to pull out of Afghanistan, make sure something like that doesn't happen in Afghanistan, should not be opening a window of negotiations with Iran, a new rapprochement. It makes perfect sense.
We just go from the other end. Any other thoughts? What is the response to the question of
And it is the digital connectivity question that you posed. There was a statement which was released by the White House, and this is essentially a statement about the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, 30th of July 2018, on the Free and Open Indo-Pacific, which for the first time mentioned the budget allotted $130.5 billion. But then it also had a list of projects, which OPIC and other US private investors, along with the government and as part of the Build Act, will try to push in the region. Digital connectivity projects are uppermost in this. And those are the projects which have been primarily identified as public-private partnership projects. So I think this essentially comes down to the fact that the US through the FOIP is perfectly aware of the need of building up a counter connectivity program, which doesn't just talk about physical connectivity, but focuses significantly more on cyber connectivity. And let me tell you, this is not just security focus. Cyber connectivity is clearly the area where the US businesses have tremendous competitive advantage and can actually come in with a significant degree of first mover advantage. Because let's not forget, this is a part of the world from where the US denied itself market access when it moved out of the TPP. Now there has to be a way of getting that access back. So this is probably the biggest option.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's clear that in the longer term US interest, we would like to, the US would like to have Afghanistan be a stable country. And that overlaps with the interest of Iran, China, as we mentioned earlier. But this administration doesn't work sort of with several countries on sort of sitting as equal partners at the table. And given the current inclination of really, seeing Iran as an adversary, unlikely that would happen. I would fully agree with you. Of course, it's in the longer term strategic interest to ensure that the immediate neighborhood will in fact play a role towards ensuring that you won't have Taliban, let alone Al-Qaeda and other even more difficult forces coming to fore. That's just not going to happen under the current administration.
Yeah, I would agree with Rani. This is not the time, unfortunately, when we can talk about the U.S. looking at Iran in a rational way. Though I would say that it was a very good sign that the United States gave India an exemption on the Iran sanctions to allow India to continue to develop, to work on the Chabahar ports in southern Iran. I think that's huge because that's the project. If it actually works out and is completed, it could have major benefits for India, but for Afghanistan as well. So I think that's the positive of the story. Also, very quickly, just 10 seconds, the previous question I didn't answer on this notion of Indian boots on the ground. I think it's always been a rumor, seen floated in the Indian media a lot about this idea that the U.S. wants India to put boots on the ground. So far as I know, there's never been any type of official request from the Trump administration for Indian boots on the ground. I think the desire is simply for India to do more of what it's already been doing, and that's the economic and development support.
Just on one of the wild cards just on Afghanistan we should think about is, and President Trump will be getting told this by advisors, which is you don't want to be the president who withdraws, gets whatever deal and withdraws. And then the year after, particularly in an election year, that there is an attack of some sort where all the things that we experienced in 2001, maybe not to that effect, we go back to that. And so that could change all these questions about Iran's factor, depending on how helpful Pakistan is, how much the US needs Pakistan, or needs to work with China, etc. Just on Huawei, I agree, I think Amitendu's talked about kind of the broader digital connectivity space, just in the US-India context. The administration has been, unlike in the case of a number of other countries where they've been very public with what they're saying countries should do, they haven't done that yet with India, and that might be partly because India has had its own concerns about this that actually preceded American concerns. Huawei and ZTE were both on kind of blacklisted by the Indian government, only recently kind of allowed in an expansive way to the, and so there is a debate. There's a debate on the kind of the classic thing of security versus economics, and even for the government that wants kind of more widespread usage, lower price points, etc. So I think it will play out. I have a sense of where it will come down, but which I think national security grounds will eventually trump. But no pun intended, but I do think it's still very much a live debate, and we can't take that necessarily for okay.
Let me just take 10 seconds on the last point Tanvi made. Just today, I think there was a report by Indian telecommunications executives sort of telling the government, like, can you make a decision on this sooner rather than later? Because if we move forward on actually using this technology, and then you tell us that 6 months later it's blacklisted or banned, that's going to be much, much more difficult to undo than if you just tell us now. And I think that's one of the signs that I think Tanvi's absolutely spot on is, this reckoning is going to come pretty soon. So,
thank you. I think we've had a wonderful afternoon. I think we've covered a range of issues, at least 3 of them, on trade, on Afghanistan, and the Indo-Pacific. Someone who's followed this relationship for a long time, I think optimism is very much warranted. And we've seen many ups and downs in the last 20 years, but the relationship has kept expanding. The size, the scope of the activity between India and the US has dramatically expanded. I think we saw the trade figures. In fact, Aman's boss, Rick Rosso, recently did a study. India's total trade has crossed $1 trillion out of 1.1 or something, including services and goods, out of a GDP of 3 trillion. So someday, that fact will register, I think, on the Indian political class. And I think that logic where India is today a trading nation that is deeply connected to the rest of the world, that logic, I think, would eventually hopefully prevail over the left and right, resistance to reform, fundamental reform on the way India deals with the trade issues. So, and I think that will have a huge positive effect on the engagement with the US. And I think all said and done, India's best trade relationship today is with the US. And it's also the most, potentially the most, which has the greatest possibilities for expansion. So I would think that's, willy-nilly kicking and screaming, there would be some adaptation in Delhi, and that would contribute. I think on Afghanistan, we saw, look, I think it's not our wish that the Americans do X or Y. Americans have done something for 17 odd years. So they leave, maybe they will leave a small CT presence because it's not that it will go to zero. So I think the either or kind of a thing, we should be careful to see. Probably there will be some force left. But the important thing for India is, I think today, as we discussed, that India takes more responsibility of engaging not merely on development that's going to get harder and harder on the security side. That will open up possibilities where India can make some contributions and work with other states in the region. I think that's what we talked about, to produce at least a reasonable set of outcome, because I think we've seen India, I think you can go back to Alexander the Great, a lot of people have come and gone in Afghanistan, but we want to get on. So we got to deal with the consequences, irrespective of what others do. And I think India will have some leverage, because even if Taliban prevails in the near term, the rest of them are going to regroup. So there's going to be a dynamic tension, and I think in that India will have a role, one kind or the other. But the key thing is to maintain that consultation with the United States, to be able to keep consulting and saying, Both of us have difficulties here, can we work together? Finally, on the Indo-Pacific has actually broadened the bilateral relationship into a very large sphere compared to where we were 20 odd years ago, only talking about the nuclear issue, to one way today we're talking about a strategic template which is huge and which holds enormous possibilities, and within which what Tanvi talked about, burden sharing becomes an interesting possibility for both countries. We didn't talk much, that was not on the agenda of the West Asia or the Middle East. While there's a lot of romance about Iran, actually today the convergence between India, US, Israel and Saudi Arabia is quite interesting. But that's another day, we'll come back to that and to look at India-US relations in the Middle East. But I just want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. I want to thank John for working with us, and we hope to continue this collaboration here in Singapore with the Asia Foundation, which has a huge presence in this part of the world. So thank you, John, again, and please thank all the panelists for giving us stimulating. This is going to be the last word from us.
Thank you, Professor Mohan, and our distinguished panelists. With that, we have come to the end of the panel discussion. Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at future ISAS events. Please do join us for some tea and refreshments at the back of the room. Have a good evening.